Well, as part of our continuing series, The CEOs, I've asked Delta Trust and Bank CEO French Hill to steer a group of discussions with some of his peers, other CEOs. This week, Hill sits down with Benny Westphal of Fort Smith-based the Westphal Group. Now, the Westphal Group is an oil and gas company doing business across several Midwestern states, including Arkansas's Arkoma Basin over in western Arkansas. Benny Westphal is plugged in a big way with what's going on in the nation's energy arena, which is undergoing significant shifts. We drop in on their conversation at the Little Rock Peabody Hotel's Mallard's Lounge.
Your dad was a CPA and was a pioneer in the real estate industry in Fort Smith. How did you get into the oil and gas business with him when you started your career?
When I was in law school in the summers, they had drilled a gas well on some property that my dad and a partner had, and Dad started getting these. This was after the Natural Gas Act of 1978 was going into effect. Mm-hmm. And so you had a jump in natural gas prices from 50 cents to $1.48. And my dad started getting these nice royalty checks off this land and thought it would be a good time to get into the oil and gas business. So they hired a retired Exxon landman to buy leases there in the city of Fort Smith out by the airport because Stevens had hit this monster gas well, and offsetting it was a section of land. They drilled it by a square mile section of land, and it was just all neighborhoods. So I thought, well, in my summers, I can get in there and I can lease in those neighborhoods too. And so I started just leasing lots. And what's funny is the first about 10 leases that I leased weren't worth the paper they're written on because I didn't have the right descriptions. It was just fractional this and that and part of this. And so I had to go back and fix those. So I just learned it from the bootstraps up and just was passionate about it and bought a lot of leases, and then my dad and his partner were sure glad when I went back to law school. I was spending all their money. But after I graduated from law school,
You learned how to get the documents right then.
Yes, yeah. I did. But and what I would do, what was so cool, is I would follow around Texas Oil and Gas, just sort of ride their coattail. And units that they were leasing, I'd go in and just get a small piece and then just back away. And I had a friend in Ozark that was a public accountant, and he did tax returns for about 2,000 farmers in the Ozark area, in Johnson County, Russellville, even over in Crawford and Sebastian County, which is right in the heart of the Arkoma Basin. And he put the word out, whatever offers they would get from whether it was Stevens or Texas Oil and Gas or Diamond Shamrock or Exxon, that we'd top their leases by just a little bit. So we had these other companies doing our geology work, doing our legal land work, and then in times we would get a lot of those leases. So and then they drilled a bunch of those wells, and so
the rest is history.
But it was fun.
Yeah.
They didn't figure out what I was doing for several years. I just kind of went under the radar.
Well, the biggest change, it seems like, just in the last 5 years, we've of course learned all about shale drilling, and we've heard the terms fracking and horizontal drilling. Not new technology in some ways, but used in a new way.
Right.
But what do you think technology, the top changes in technology in the oil and gas business are, and what do you see for the future?
The thing that has really changed the oil and gas industry is the ability to horizontally drill, basically in these shales, but sandstones too, economically. Devon started years ago in the Barnett Shale, just south of Fort Worth, and they spent tens of millions of dollars perfecting horizontal drilling. And it has just been amazing at how they can drill 1 mile vertical and then go 1 mile, 2 miles, even now 3 miles horizontally. And so you get this where you may have a shale that's 100 foot thick, and if you drill through it vertically, you only have that 100 feet so far from it bleeding into the wellbore. But if you go into that shale horizontally for 5,000 feet or 10,000 feet, then you exponentially have all of this product, whether it's gas or oil, going into it, and people are just making these huge gas wells and oil wells just all over the country. And there's booms going on in the Marcellus up by Pennsylvania. There's booms going on in the up in the Williston in North Dakota, where the Bakken Shale is, which is primarily oil. The Haynesville in North Louisiana, and then you got the Woodford, you got the Fayetteville Shale. But horizontal drilling has caused us to have a tremendous surplus of natural gas. And that's why gas has moved from $10+ down to $3.50 or 75 cents. And
you see that as a price outlook for the foreseeable future, because we seem to in Canada and the U.S. consistently explore and find trillions more cubic feet than we thought.
Yes, I think the prices are going to be low for the near future. But over the next 5 years, and this is where some of these regulations that are taking place, they're going to be shutting down dozens of these coal-fired generators and replacing them with natural gas, because it's just so plentiful.
Or at least converting, I guess, the plant to be able to do
convert
either
them,
one.
yes, or convert them if possible.
Well, what about, and who would be if somebody was interested in following a company that was particularly good at horizontal drilling, is it only the big guys, or are there some entrepreneurs out there that are really good operators in doing the horizontal drilling? I mean,
I
know there's that technology now, after Devon pioneered it, really spread to all the operating companies.
They pretty much will share knowledge on that. And because a lot of these companies are partners in the same wells,
right?
And so BP is and Exxon, XTO, they're really big in horizontal drilling, especially in this area. And there's just dozens of Devons, and I could list you dozens of companies that are drilling horizontally, and then there are a lot of these smaller companies that are popping up that have been in the right place, like up there in North Dakota. I mean, some of those horizontal Bakken shale wells are coming in at 2,000 barrels a day of oil.
Right.
And then they're drilling these wells over in Midland, Texas, and going in these old oil fields and drilling horizontal now and recovering a lot of oil that the vertical wells weren't able to recover.
And we're seeing that potentially here in Arkansas in the Smackover?
Yes. And that's something that if the Smackover, Southwestern Energy has like 450,000 acres that they have leased along the Arkansas-Louisiana line down by Magnolia. And they have drilled one well southeast of Magnolia that I know of, and that well was only making like 50 to 100 barrels a day. But they're learning, because I mean each formation is different.
Right.
And those wells there are costing about $10 million each to drill, but they can get that cost down to like $7. The extra $3 million, because they're doing their studies, they're coring it, and they're doing all this extra stuff to learn and to get samples of the rock, so that they know when they frack it what materials to frack it with that react positively to the rock and enhance the flow rates.
Right. And 3D seismic is another technological innovation that's really changing oil, and I think it's not gotten the same maybe general press coverage and talk in the financial press that horizontal drilling has. But we wouldn't be doing horizontal drilling like we were if we didn't have the rapid data through
That's
the
right.
3D seismic.
This 3D seismic, and the kind of data they have now, and it's only about 10 years old, and 10 years ago, to get some of that done, these computers would take it would take a weekend for computers to do the calculations and all that, and now they can just do it in just a half a second. And what they're doing is, with 3D, you have these shot points that are like 100 feet apart, and it's just a grid, and you get triangulation. So you can hit. You have a target here. Say you have an 80-acre target, and 80 acres of 40 feet of oil can hold 1 million barrels of oil. Half to 1 million barrels of oil. But now with 3D seismic, they can hit that right on the nose, and then it'll match up with. Whereas with 2D, you don't have that triangulation, so you can be off. Yeah. And so that's where some of these smaller operators, your big operators, they're offshore and they're using 3D offshore and drilling these deep prospects because you can find 100 million, 200 million barrels. It was funny on the BP blowout. I've got a friend that their company has interest in some of the blocks to the offset, and he was saying he was watching them interview BP, and they was asking about all this oil they were losing, and BP's comment was, he says, "Oh, it's only a 100 million barrel oil field." So for the big boys, that sounds small, but for us smaller independents going after these 80-acre, 200-acre traps that you can hit, the 3D has allowed a lot more oil to be recovered in our country, and the horizontal drilling.
So, but I mean, that's increasing productivity, reducing the cost of discovery, aiding in energy independence, all just through the pioneering in 3D technology and the processing speed of computers now.
That's
to be able
exactly
to do the data
right.
work.
Because you get that cost down.
So you see fewer dry holes in a development field, not a wildcat field, but in a development field.
A lot fewer dry holes because you can pinpoint exactly where you want to drill. Mm-hmm. And back when the 3D just come out, to do one square cost you $200,000. Now one square
and a square is how big?
It's about it's a little bigger than a square mile.
Okay.
And the one square for $200,000, when now you can do it for $20,000.
Wow.
And that's in open country. That's not in populated areas, and it's all relative where it's and in the Rockies it would be more than it would be in the Delta, or in the swamps it'd be more. So it's all relative, but it just gives you an idea of how it's come down to 1/10 of the cost that it used to be.
Well, let's turn to regulatory policy. Technology is certainly enhancing domestic oil and gas business, but every time when we pick up a paper, we read about either regulatory policy or tax policy on incentives to energy independence.
Right.
To take nothing away from renewables, obviously, we have to have renewables in the future, and research and technology will be going there, but there's really nothing in the short run that has the same return on investment, same productivity, same effectiveness to turn on the lights in your home or get you to work than fossil fuels.
Right.
So what's going on in the regulatory and sort of tax environment?
I don't think that the people in Washington fully understand the oil and gas industry and what it provides to this country. I know that clean energy is a way to go, but like you say, we're not going to stop flying planes and trucks anytime soon. And what Washington is trying to do is, on the Democratic side, is they're wanting to do away with the depletion allowances, and then the intangible drilling cost, not allow that to be expensed. And the problem with those things is the oil and gas, when you're dependent 60% on people that don't like us, that we're getting our oil from, I don't see why our government doesn't, and the government, our country needs money. There's no question about it. But you have to be careful in hindering investment to get into, because it is a risky business. It is. And the difference in oil and gas and in real estate, when you drill a dry hole, your salvage value is zero. And so I don't think, in the push and pull between the Republicans and the Democrats, I don't know where that's going to come out, but I think that the oil bottom line, I think the oil and gas industry is going to be taxed more, and we do need money to pay our bills, but I think there'll be some type of balance in that. But as far as regulation in a state, there is a proposal to raise the severance tax to 7% in Arkansas. And the problem is the proposal to raise that, to send it before the voters, it's just a flat 7%.
Okay.
And if you look at other states like Oklahoma, they have 7%, but they also have exemptions for certain types of wells, deep wells, expensive wells, and then if a well becomes marginal, which most of the wells in Arkansas and Oklahoma are marginal. I mean, when you look at all the thousands of wells that have been drilled, a lot of them are 20, 30 years old, and the severance rate on marginal wells are a lot less than they are on new wells.
And that's sort of like our severance tax that the legislature modified a few years ago.
Yes,
it does have a sort of return on capital piece, particularly for the shale wells. And
right,
it had
and that's
some
good.
Of these,
yeah, that's good, and I'm okay with that. But just to do a 7% flat, especially with natural gas down to $3.75, I think what you're going to do is you're going to hurt some investment. You're going to hurt some investment, and I think sometimes the regulations, and we got to have regulations, but like for them just to shut down drilling in the Gulf, there's been 43,000 wells drilled in the Gulf of Mexico, and we have that terrible blowout, and they just put a moratorium on drilling other wells. And the problem is those deep rigs, those deep wells, they will employ 1,200 people that are responsible when you add the tugboats and all the people involved, is about 1,200 jobs. And there were, I think, like 40-something rigs drilling deep that they just had a moratorium on. And so what happened is a lot of those rigs went to Africa, went to the Indonesia, China, and they just went Australia. They just went to the Middle East. They just went to other parts of the world, because those things, you're talking $500,000, $1 million a day rental on some of those big deep rigs. And but anyway, that's about all that I know on the regulation.
I noticed they just had an announcement here in the last few days about well water contamination.
Yes.
Duke University is studying wells in Arkansas, both near drilling and away from drilling as a control, both in the shale area, and I think they're also going to go into production areas that are not shale connected.
Right.
Has that been an issue in over the years? I mean, it's an issue talked about now, but has that been an issue in past years? And the survey, the data released here recently says that they found no contamination of well water, because that's obviously a lot lower depth than where the drilling and actual frack work is taking place. But
you're right. Your groundwater is the first few hundred feet is your groundwater, and so the Oil and Gas Commission, they regulate setting your surface pipe and cementing off your groundwater. So so you're cemented off, so you can't have any contamination. You're just that's cemented off, and then when you then down where they're doing the fracking is a mile, can be from 3/4 to 2 miles deep, and it's just humanly impossible for you to contaminate the fresh water.
So surface problems would come from wastewater disposal potentially.
Yes,
certainly, but that wouldn't necessarily. In theory, that could be a source of well water contamination.
Right, and that is because when they frack one of these wells, I mean, it'll use 1 million gallons of water, and you've got to get rid of that water. And what they can do is what they've been doing is they just re-inject that into some of these saltwater disposable, where there's reservoirs down 1 mile, 2 miles deep, and just pumping back that water from the salt water that's produced from the wells. And so there is way, and there's these companies that treat it, and that is an issue. And with so much activity going on, that does cause problems with the roads, and it does
because they've got to transport it to Oklahoma. I think
right,
we have very few disposal wells in Arkansas.
Right, and they're even taking it to Louisiana. So there is a problem there, but it is being addressed, and the Oil and Gas Commission has hired extra people to address those problems. And but you look at the benefit of what is taking place. You look at a company like Southwestern Energy that has I don't know what it is now, 1.5, 2 BCF a day. You're talking, and the landowners have 12.5 to 20% of that. That's a lot of money that's going into mineral owners in Arkansas,
right,
which I think more than offsets, because these problems here, those wells are going to last for years and years and years, and these problems can be solved.
I've read where some states are considering not changing their severance tax, maybe keeping it unique to the well capitalization and well production and well history, but having an impact fee.
Yes.
For drillers really active in a new area because of road damage and things like that. I wondered does Oklahoma have one of those? Are you familiar with them?
I'm not sure about Oklahoma. I don't think so. But I know that Pennsylvania, the governor is proposing a impact fee, and they're
because I presume that would go away once a given part of a county were drilled out,
right,
for example, or be reduced dramatically.
Right. And up there, the Marcellus Shale is up there in Pennsylvania and New York. And New York is supplied by this big underground aquifer. And so New York is really scared about letting drilling go on in New York in case that if there's some crazy mishap,
right,
that it could pollute the water that supplies water to people in New York City.
Right.
So, there's always two sides to every story, and it's always there's a lot of economic development, economic potential there. It's just dealing with it in a safe way. And I think our industry has done a really good job in safety. There's always accidents. There's plane crashes and so there's going to be accidents, but I think that the industry as a whole has done very well. And but when you get up in the Northeast where you have lots of populations, it gets heated up a little bit more.